This is the Visions and Tones podcast with Dr. T.
Welcome to the latest edition. This is a special entry because it is not an entry which was scheduled, but I thought it is important to sort of chip it in. I've got a good friend of mine who really agreed to afford me the opportunity to chat with me. He's not a new person, almost becoming a regular now, but I'm always excited chatting to him. And he is Dr. Q, for those who would remember him, Dr. Qinisani Gwabe, who is a lecturer at the Nelson Mandela University in the Department of Agricultural Science, and he holds a PhD in Sustainable Food Systems from the University of Free State in South Africa, and is also the newly elected chairperson of the Australia Africa University's Early Career Researchers Network. Dr. Q, welcome again to the Visions and Tones.
Greetings to you, Tony. Greetings to your listeners. Thanks for having me once again.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, we are pushing to have this conversation simply because you wrote a beautiful piece, which is published on foodfromzansi.co.za, and you sort of asked people to go through the piece, and the piece is sort of titled Steenhuisen's Appointment, Hope or Concern for South Africa or South African Agriculture. Basically, there's a question mark there. But just to give a little bit of a context to our listeners who are not based in South Africa, John Steenhuisen is a leader of the second largest political party in South Africa, the Democratic Alliance. And South Africa went into their seventh administrative elections in the democratic dispensation, where the ruling party could not get the two-thirds majority. In fact, their numbers plummeted there below 50%, therefore resulting into what is currently happening, which is the formation of the Government of National Unity. And as a result, we see John Steenhuisen coming from the Conservative Party being appointed there to be the leader of the agriculture ministry in the governance. So I just wanted to give our listeners a little bit of that context. Now, you asked us to go through the piece. What exactly was going through your mind, Dr. Q, just maybe as a first question? What was going into your mind when you were, putting down this piece?
Well, that was actually a response to what was happening on the social streets. I remember I was watching the president making the announcement, while he was making the announcement. And I don't know why he did that, to be quite honest, because the first person he started with, or one of the first few people, were Steenhuisen, John Steenhuisen. And that was a shocker, I think, for everyone that was watching and listening to the president. And so a couple of minutes after that, there was this huge commotion on social media, Facebook and Twitter in particular. Oh, it's now X, Facebook and X. And everybody was saying that, almost everyone was saying that we are going to be losing out on the benefits that are offered by this government. We are supposed to benefit from these guys, but it seems like it's no longer going to happen. I remember in particular, there's this Facebook page. It's a page for farmers. And I think in hundreds, they spoke in one voice, stressing that they mustn't even attempt to seek assistance from government now, because it's evident that John Steenhuisen is going to be catering for his own people, because that is what the DA is famously known for, to cater for their own. Arguably so, one could say the ANC or any other parties like that, by the way. And so I was then asked by a very good somebody to respond to what was happening at that time. It was in the middle of the night. And so I put down that article. And that's why I made reference to what happened historically. I'm not sure if you recall the article. I speak about pre-1994. To the time we transitioned to a democratic country.
Yes. Okay. That's perfect. I mean, it's good that you are writing this because you're asked to contribute as a, respondent to what is currently the, popular narratives that are going out on social media. And I mean, you are a young person yourself, probably that's a good thing to find a young person who can write something that can appeal to the young people. You are good in terms of your work and your profession. Some of the things that you've sort of mentioned are things that I've actually put down as few more couple of questions that we can sort of unpack in relation to your piece. I do have your piece. It's opened right here in front of me. I just want to give a caveat a little bit here. The caveat is on the basis that I have not spent enough time to look into the full document of the Government of National Unity as to how exactly are they going to function. I think it is important to sort of understand that, though, but unfortunately I could not have that enough time. But I do have a couple of questions which is sort of in line with why it is important for us to know how the government is going to sort of function. I don't know whether on your side you've spent enough time to sort of look at the document. My inkling is the fact that even though other political parties are coming to join the leading political party, being the ANC, in terms of votes, at the end of the day, they're not just there to be caretakers of positions. They do want to advance their own policies. The question is, to what extent then can they push their own buttons in that kind of a way? And how they're going to sort of reunite, in a sense that we know the ANC, the African National Congress policies are said to sort of be leaning towards, the left and the Democratic Alliance policies tend to sort of be leaning towards the right. But how do we pull together both the left and the right such that we find ourselves in a more functional government for all South Africans? So maybe the second question would be, to what extent maybe have you sort of perused the full document of the Government of National Unity?
I'll be honest, I haven't really had much time to go into it. In fact, I've been relying mainly on what I hear, because the only time I get nowadays to listen to do something related to politics is when I listen to radio or watch the news late in the day. However, I am of the assumption that how this is going to work out is how we've been seeing coalition government work in South Africa. I don't think there will be anything particularly different, except for people executing their duties as expected and as indicated in their portfolios. I think what is going to be an anchor for the GNU is the Constitution, as has always been the case. Most people, again, sorry to deviate, most people have been indicating that because of this GNU and with the DA and VF Plus being a part of government now, we are going to see a change in policies, change that doesn't particularly resonate with Black people or favor Black people. But then my thing has been, we have a constitution in which we all work around. I don't think that there would be any changes in terms of what has to be done or how they function in their respective portfolios.
Right. Be as that may be the case, I like where you are taking me. I wasn't sort of intending to jump onto this one first. In the piece, you make certain assertions which I would like to sort of pull them out, maybe bits by bits, and then we try to address certain sections. For instance, you say here, John Steenhuisen's race, meaning as a white person, should not provoke concerns about apartheid inequalities. In what way do you see that not provoking, in the context where the Democratic Alliance, yes, we do have a constitution, but the Democratic Alliance policies seem to be leaning a lot towards, the neoliberal agenda, which is sort of promoting the private sector. And at the same time, as a build-up towards the elections, and just a little bit after the elections, during the talks towards, Government of National Unity, you come across the federal leaders, Helen Zille, making assertions such as the market will not be plausible to a Black government. In fact, Black people are going to kick out, investors. But also, while you listen to those comments, one would say, well, we are just, making false claims and so on and so forth. All these are just hyperboles and whatsoever. But then we are given a case where when the Democratic Alliance threatened to leave the table of negotiations in the Government of National Unity, then we see the rand there plummeting, showing particular signs that probably there are real concerns in terms of how race shaped the economy of South Africa. What would you say about that?
Well, for starters, I think there's a lot of assertions that have been uttered by, what is she? Is she a chief for DA
She's the
now?
federal chairperson.
Yes, she's chairperson for DA. There's been a lot of problematic assertions that she's been making ever since the GNU talks have started. And yeah, I think that's a thing. We can just put her aside. Otherwise, if we focus on her, we would have an entire different conversation altogether. However, with Steenhuisen's race in particular, you know, I'm I'm a firm believer that the people that are working with the ANC or everybody that's in government right now, these are smart people that know where our country is from and where we are now. They understand what the country needs and what is going to push the country going forward. I don't particularly think that anybody would pull that race. I'm not sure if I have to refer to it as a race card for the benefit of their own at this point in time, because I don't think the DA or any other white dominant party would want to see the repeat of what happened prior 1994. My thing, if we're to argue about the appointment of the new Minister for Agriculture, is if he's competent as an individual for that specific portfolio, not to put race, not to attach race to it. I think if it was a different person, we wouldn't be having a similar conversation. If it was another white person, apart from Steenhuisen, I don't think that there would be this noise. We see them in other portfolios, but there hasn't been much that's been said about them, you know? But because
Yes.
it's Steenhuisen, so I don't think it's particularly a race thing, or we don't really have to make it a race thing. I think more than anything, it has to be a thing of, is he going to do justice in that portfolio?
I don't want to make so most of the statements I'll make would be a little bit passive about the African National Congress, because I think the point here is about Steenhuisen, and I wanted to sort of hammer a lot about Steenhuisen and his political party. And the point is not also to speak necessarily about the entire Democratic Alliance. But first, let's go back to Helen Zille. I think we do need to bring Helen Zille into context, because Helen Zille's statements, whatever she has said, whether we agree as to whether it's problematic or not, but the thing is the economy, the rand shifted in the direction of the things that she has said. So I don't think it's a person that you can say, let's put her aside because she's saying things that are problematic. If she's saying things that are problematic, but we see then the rand, we see the economy actually behaving in a way that she said it, therefore she's leading us to evidence that whatever she's saying is correct. And again, on the point, I respect the idea when you say race should not sort of be much more of a factor. That is exactly one of the things that I would hold. But again, we are talking about a party which has been criticized for racism. We're talking about a political party where it lost a number of people of color, and all of them actually cited aspects of disrespect for their own portfolios, disrespect for their own professions, and so on and so forth. And some would even get to the extent of saying, here we are, John Steenhuisen, yes, he's a leader of the party, but now he's been put to be a minister of a certain position, whereas the Democratic Alliance before said a whole lot of criticisms about people who are in leadership positions in the African National Congress, not having any sort of experience, not having any qualifications. But John himself cannot give to us at this particular moment any kind of, tertiary qualifications, but he's coming to be a minister of agriculture. What can you say then about that pushback?
Well, I wonder if qualification in this context is about the degrees that one holds, or if it is about experience, and maybe added to that would be the back-end qualifications. Because I was actually reading about John Steenhuisen. Before I continue, Evan, please, your listeners must not think that I'm defending John Steenhuisen. I am not even sure if I like or dislike the gentleman. I was reading about him and I found some interesting facts that he's been in the leadership position within the DA since the early 90s or 1989. I don't quite remember. But he's a well experienced somebody in the political space. And it seems to me like he has anchored himself well in that space. And I don't know how to justify the qualifications part, because they've been very clear that whoever holds office must be qualified. But what I do not know is whether they say this in terms of the papers that one holds, or if it is by experience, as in the case of
It
John
is within the
Steenhuisen.
context of the papers too. It is. I want to put it there. Sorry, I want to put it to you that it is also in terms of the papers, because if you remember, there were even a whole lot of statements which were made about how people from the African National Congress have been actually using some of the South African institutions to get papers, but they have never been in the classroom. So I don't know whether they've got ghostwriters or whatever the case.
Mm.
And they
Okay.
did make serious pride about people like Mpopalatse, who was the former mayor in Johannesburg, who was part of them, that we do produce people who've got qualification. They do take a flaunt with her.
Okay, then based on what you're saying, the question for me would be, is there a concern people without qualifications, as in like papers, or people that claim to have qualifications but that are not rightfully theirs?
You don't have the paper at the end of the day.
You don't have the paper at the end of the day. I guess it's a thing of dishonesty. You lie and say that you've got a PhD, but you don't have a PhD. That's a different case altogether. But then again, like I said, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the DA or John Steenhuisen. But yeah, there on qualifications, I'm sorry. I can't say much on that.
Can you tie the other two parts then? Helen Zille, yes, problematic, but she's saying something and the market is reacting to her. And then also, secondly, the fact that there has been a number of high-profile people who left the Democratic Alliance on the basis of racial differences and treatments and whatsoever.
Well, I don't know if there is much you can do. If that's the case, I'm going to give a very stupid response there. If that's the case, then I think it's a blessing in disguise that we're working together with the DA or white parties, for that matter, if what they say works to the favor of our economy. Because that means that everybody is going to benefit. If the DA seems to be in agreement with what the ANC or all these other parties say, then everybody is going to benefit. The strength of the rand is going to go up. However, now being serious, when the president announced the new cabinet, I kept a very close look on what was happening in the market, and I saw our rand strengthening. And I think you would remember, I even posted on WhatsApp, I think the rand was 17.89 to the US dollar. And we haven't gotten there in a very long time. And what that signaled to me was that the international market seems to be in favor of the GNU, the collaborative effort, if you may, between all these parties. I would say, this is just my assumption, the DA and the ANC.
It's fair, but I can put it to you. Because the pushback I wanted to give to that is that I don't think it's a very plausible argument to say the rand was strengthening and it's because the market is applauding the relationship between the Democratic Alliance and the African National Congress. I don't think it has anything to do with supporting the government of national unity at all, but I think it's about the Democratic Alliance sort of being there, because I can make the claim that had it been a strong alliance, strong coalition between the African National Congress and the Umkhonto weSizwe Party and the Economic Freedom Fighter, the rand would have actually even lost so much strength beyond any imaginable doubt, because we have been observing the extent to which, the rand has been, not so much consistent a lot when it comes to, if there's more activism, whatever kind of revolutionary movements that might be happening in the country. For instance, if you were able to sort of trace a little bit what was happening in the clouds of the Economic Freedom Fighters when they were at the FNB Stadium, how you saw the way in which when people were tweeting and posting a lot about the Economic Freedom Fighter, the rand actually reacted a little bit during those times. So my argument is that I don't think it's necessarily because the economy is applauding the government of national unity, but I think it's because of the DA's involvement in there. Would you say that kind of a view is flawed?
No, I wouldn't particularly say it is flawed. But then again, we may be wrong in our view if we are to make that assertion. Agreed, there is a correlation between the two. But then in this case, it's a very unique case, Tony. There was no clarity in terms of governance, in terms of the way forward as far as it concerns South Africa's government. And this is something that everybody was saying. If you watched CNN, BBC, they're saying that the reason why we are seeing this negative trend in our economy right now, it is because we just don't know where the country is headed. Nobody knew where the country was headed. And there was a lot of back and forth in terms of talks. And so that shook things quite a bit. So I don't think we should particularly assume that it's because Helen Zille said something during that time. Maybe that is true, but also there was this big elephant in the room. We just didn't know what was happening. Even us within the country, we had no clear clue of what was going on.
Well,
And this happened for a very long period. I think 3 or 4 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, let me leave that one and not push it further because I still have a couple of questions to sort of put to. In the piece, you sort of mentioned something to give a little bit of a context. You specify that there's a difference between the Ministry of Agriculture and also the Ministry of Land Reform and Rural Development. But you come and then you make this statement to say many people still believe that the reason why there is a significant economic divide between whites and blacks is because of the unjust policies and practices of the past, which gave little to no recognition to black men. But I'd say it's not just only the policies of the past, but it's also attempts for now to sort of discredit certain policies that aimed at, redressing part of the past atrocities. You think about black economic empowerment, you think about affirmative action. The DA came out very strongly talking about, doing away with those policies because they're not working. Now, I do need to sort of put it there that I do agree with the fact that the policies could have done quite a lot. I mean, such comes even from other economists likes of Moile Tsimbeki, likes of Duma Qubule, that have actually questioned the extent to which, black economic empowerment really liberated many people, apart from just raising few political elites who come and rub shoulders with the very same fellow white people. What can you say then about that? The fact that it's not just policies of the past, but also intentions to sort of cancel policies of the now that aims at addressing the redress. The Democratic Alliance came out strongly to say we need to do away with BEE, we need to do away with affirmative action. So that itself, in my argument, I'd say it still intensifies the fact that black people are likely to see that, well, the Democratic Alliance is not in any way in favor of us as black people. Because why do away with BEE instead of saying, let's try to sort of see what has not worked about it so that we try to push and work on what can work for it. So the aspect of black people not seeing the Democratic Alliance through the lens of race, I think it's close to nothing. They'll always see it through the lens of race.
Yeah, of course. They always will. And again, I think it's because the DA seniors, in particular John Steenhuisen and Helen Zille, they don't have filters when they speak. They just say what they think is and don't care how it lands to the people. But in all honesty, I think they do mean well, because how they approach this is from an economic perspective. What works against them is that they don't fully comprehend the struggles of black people. And so when they say these things, they speak from a point of privilege. Let's grow the economy and leave out all the other socioeconomic factors that people are particularly concerned about. I do, however, think that when they make such claims talking about this, sorry, I was listening to Helen Zille saying that in KZN, we've got a lot of land, arable land that is, but what are we doing with that land? If you compare it to the Western Cape, which is not so arable, the Western Cape is doing far better. Again, tapping into deep waters there and seriously frustrating people because we know why that's the case. I do think that when such assertions are made, they speak from a point of ignorance, and rightfully so, people have to be frustrated. But I am happy again because they are not in power. They are not in power, at least alone, as the Democratic Alliance. And so the GNU helps in this regard because they can't make any drastic changes without the consent of the other parties.
So if you say at
I'm
least
not
you
sure
are
if that
happy,
responds to that question.
if you're saying you are happy at least that they are not in power alone, are you making an indirect submission that you were going to be much more concerned if they were in power alone?
I don't know. I think I do have the fear that most people have when it comes to a white supremacy as far as governance is concerned. I'm not sure if I am ready for that yet. I think we are in our early stages of democracy, and I don't think that if we were to see that sort of leadership now, we would quickly go back to where we come from.
But I thought, beginning of our chat, you were very confident that if the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front Plus come together, because we do have a constitution, therefore we are never going to go back to the apartheid times. I thought that's what you said beginning of the entry.
They're still working with the black majority. We must not put that aside. They're still working with the black majority, which in this case is still the ANC. So these parties are going to balance each other in terms of.
No. The point is that when we started, the point is that you said when we started, we do have a now functional constitution. You do doubt that even if the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front Plus were to come together, would ever go back to the times of apartheid, unless if I heard you incorrectly.
No, you didn't hear me incorrectly. But then again, saying this was in the context of the GNU.
Okay, so it's only in the context of the GNU.
Yes, it's within the context.
So you do have full confidence that the African National Congress can never at all betray black people?
I feel like you're cornering me here. I don't know. That's the best response I'm going to give you. I don't know if
but we do have the evidence that they have, because they've moved away from the Freedom Charter and they started to indicate right when they came with leftist policies. That's basically a betrayal of the people.
I guess if you put it like that, then I'll take that, my friend. But all I'm saying is, in terms of trust, as somebody who is a member of civil society, it's easier for me to trust black leaders, a black party that speaks for black people in particular, that understands the needs of the black majority. I'm not saying that I don't believe in white-dominated parties. I think they also have a very good role to play in this country. I just don't think that at this point in time, we are ready to be governed by a white party.
I've got two questions for you, my friend, not knowing whether there will be any probes in between. In the paper, you say, what South Africans expect from the agricultural sector in the current era is sustainable agricultural development that will enable job creation, inclusive economic growth, food security, and responsible resource management. And earlier on, you were just alluding a little bit on land. I wanted to add land on this, which you actually didn't touch in your paper, because earlier you had said there's a difference between, agriculture and also land reform and rural development. But the reason why I'm bringing land here is because I do see the two ministries at some point speaking to one another. Let's say hypothetically, land expropriation does succeed. Let's say land expropriation does succeed. We know the Democratic Alliance is against land expropriation, not just land expropriation without compensation, but land expropriation in itself. They've been very vocal about, title deeds, ownership, and so on and so forth. Do you think John Steenhuisen is a person who can be trusted to be accurate and to be truthful in terms of which land is available for agriculture in the context where land might have to be taken from white farmers and given to black people?
No, definitely not. I'm not even going to try and justify that. He's not your guy when it comes to that, because he doesn't believe that there has to be an expropriation of land to begin with. So that's not anything that he would entertain. But the nice thing is, given that there's these two ministries, and it used to be like this historically, by the way, the merging of the two departments is a new thing. We don't really need, I don't think we really need Steenhuisen's signature when it comes to that. So it would be Land Reform and Rural Development Minister that responds to such. Obviously, working together with Steenhuisen, having to get inputs on what land can be utilized for whatever projects. But I don't think that he has an upper hand when it comes to that one. Whether he gives an input or not, it doesn't really matter. There will be an overlap between the two ministries because rural development and land reform pretty much has to do with agriculture in itself, to be quite honest. And so I think as an independent department, John Steenhuisen's voice is neither here nor there.
Right. My last question, Doc. You were at Nampo Harvest Day. I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing that very well, but you say
Yes,
that
that's
in the
correct. But I
piece
wasn't there.
you weren't there.
No, I wasn't. And not last year, not this year.
Okay, but I thought you said something about you heard him at least saying something at Nampo. I don't know whether was it when you were
posted
there.
It.
He posted.
He posted it. You can find it online. Yes,
all
it's
right.
a video even.
But he said, you're saying here, he said, what does it say? A plan to make the lives of farmers or farming communities safer and to drastically improve and upgrade the infrastructure is crucial to this economy. That's basically what he said. I was just keen knowing one of the things that the Democratic Alliance has been sort of vocal with in the past few years, which according to me, I'm still waiting to see any facts being presented, is the idea of white farmer genocide. So as the Minister of Agriculture, how do you see him addressing the idea of white farmer genocide, which surprisingly during the elections campaign and now we don't even hear the Democratic Alliance that once sang songs about white farmer genocide. Now they're actually quiet about that, which to me, I can say it's one of the things which they actually used to sabotage the economy because even during those times, the economy was busy twerking when they were talking about white farmer genocide. I don't know what's your take about that. Yes, white farmers are being killed, but I mean, the context through which they used it was to put it as though black people just get into the farms and kill white farmers for no particular reason. What's your take on that?
I actually found that period in particular that you're making reference to, I found it to be quite disturbing because we were losing a lot of black farmers. In fact, I remember one of those days, a friend of mine and I went to Wenen near Newcastle in KZN. And just as we got there, we went to this house and the neighbors, farmers, the gentleman is a lawyer and the wife is a doctor, or the other way around. And they murdered all three children and the wife, but they wanted the man of the house, who is a farmer who owns this huge amount of land. But nothing is said about such when it is black people, and there were many of those events. And all we ever hear are white killings, which is quite unfortunate. And to be quite honest, I also don't know the stats. I don't know how many black people have died, but I know there's a lot of them that have died in the recent past. Can't say much about whites. In terms of what he can do to protect farmers, I'm waiting to see. I don't know. I wonder if they even have a solution. Sometimes, Tony, it's easy to make assertions when you are in opposition, when you are observing and not the one who actually has to implement something.
Mm-hmm.
Now he is within the system. It would be interesting to see how he actually works on how he works on that. I don't know how he plans to do it, or even if he and the DA have an idea. But we wait and see. I think these are all the interesting things that we should anticipate going forward.
I think for me, Doc, thank you so much, first of all, for taking the time. I know you're in between meetings, you're organizing too many things. I appreciate you agreeing to have a chat with me. For me, the main thing, I guess, if I can just maybe close this about the piece, is the fact that I felt like it's an interesting piece. You're trying to bring sort of a unifying angle, but I felt like the unifying angle is more preachy in a sense that there are certain realities that I think South Africans need to sort of see the evidence before they can really begin to trust. And the reason for that is because we come from a broken past. Apartheid wasn't an easy thing. And at the same time, we come from a lot of empty promises from the African National Congress. Therefore, to come and just say, here is John Steenhuisen, his political party is very evident in terms of pro-white, is very evident in terms of neoliberal markets. Therefore, people need to start believe technically that he is going to sort of advance the needs of both blacks and whites. For me, that sounds too quick promising, and which is why I felt like the piece is good. It sort of gives a positive lens that people should use to gaze, but the reality, I feel like it's too far from the peaceful aspect in which you were preaching. And this is not to say stop writing the way you're writing, but it's to say, at least I appreciate that having this conversation with you, it gives me more other perspective in terms of what exactly because agricultural space is your space. It's definitely not my space, but thank you so much for really clarifying some of the things for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tony.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, listeners of the Visions and Tones. That was Dr. Qinisani Gwabe, and I'll put up the link on the bio of this episode so you can see his contribution. Go ye and be best human beings and best versions of yourselves. We are out. Cheers.